On February 11, 2025, former US President Donald Trump announced the reimposition of tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The tariffs, set at 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum, sent shockwaves through the global trade community. This move directly targeted long-standing allies, including the European Union, the UK, and Japan, reversing previous exemptions. The decision, reminiscent of similar actions taken during Trump's first presidency, marked a return to protectionist trade policies. The justification provided for these tariffs was rooted in national security concerns. The Trump administration argued that reliance on foreign steel and aluminum posed a threat to the United States' ability to maintain domestic production capacity. This, they claimed, was essential for national defense. However, critics argued that these concerns were unfounded, and that the tariffs were primarily a means of protecting domestic industries from international competition. The timing of the announcement, coming amidst heightened geopolitical tensions, further fueled speculation about the true motives behind the tariffs. With the global economy already grappling with uncertainty, the reintroduction of trade barriers threatened to disrupt supply chains and stifle economic growth. The impact on international relations was immediate, straining ties between the United States and its closest allies. The EU in particular emerged as a vocal critic of the reimposed tariffs. Having previously been caught in a tit-for-tat trade war with the Trump administration, the bloc was quick to denounce the move as unjustified and harmful to both economies. The stage was set for a renewed trade conflict with potentially far-reaching consequences for the global trading system. The European Union wasted no time in condemning the reimposed tariffs. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, issued a strongly worded statement labeling the tariffs unjustified and vowing a firm and proportionate response. Her words reflected a sentiment shared across the EU, where the tariffs were widely seen as an attack on European industry and a violation of international trade rules. In a show of unity, the EU convened an emergency meeting of trade ministers in Brussels. The meeting, chaired by EU Trade Chief Maros Šefčovič, aimed to formulate a coordinated response to the tariffs. Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany, a key player in the EU's economic landscape, emphasized the need for a united front. He stressed that a divided response would only embolden the Trump administration and weaken the EU's position in future negotiations. The EU's response was not limited to rhetoric. Šefčovič, echoing the concerns of many economists, warned of the economically counterproductive nature of the tariffs. He predicted a lose-lose scenario with increased costs for US businesses, fueled inflation, and disruption to the deeply integrated production chains between the EU and the US. This, he argued, would ultimately harm consumers on both sides of the Atlantic. Central to the EU's concerns was the impact on European steelmakers. Already facing pressure from global overcapacity, particularly from China, the tariffs threatened to further undermine their competitiveness. The United States, as the third largest importer of EU steel, represented a significant market for European producers. The tariffs, they argued, would not only lead to job losses, but also stifle investment and innovation in the European steel industry. While emphasizing a desire to avoid a full-blown trade war, the EU made it clear that it would not hesitate to defend its interests. Discussions in Brussels focused on retaliatory tariffs, targeting specific American goods to exert maximum political and economic pressure. This tactic, reminiscent of the EU's response to the 2018 tariffs, aimed to inflict pain on sectors seen as crucial to the Trump administration's political base. Among the potential targets were products like motorcycles, bourbon, peanut butter, and jeans, all originating from Republican-leaning states. The EU's strategy, honed during past trade disputes, aimed to exploit the political realities of the United States, leveraging economic pain to force a change in policy. However, this approach also carried the risk of escalation, potentially triggering a spiral of tit-for-tat retaliation that could harm both economies. Beyond tariffs, the EU also explored the option of filing a complaint with the World Trade Organization. This legal avenue, while potentially lengthy and complex, offered a means of challenging the legality of the tariffs under international trade rules. A favorable ruling from the WTO could force the United States to withdraw the tariffs or face further retaliatory measures from the EU. However, the effectiveness of the WTO dispute settlement system had been called into question in recent years, particularly due to the United States blocking of appointments to the WTO appellate body. This cast doubt on the EU's ability to achieve a timely and favorable resolution through the WTO. Nonetheless, pursuing a WTO case served a dual purpose: upholding the rules-based trading system and rallying international support against what the EU perceived as unilateral and protectionist actions by the United States. Despite the escalating tensions, both the EU and the United States acknowledged the need for dialogue and a negotiated solution. The deeply intertwined nature of their economies, with extensive trade and investment ties, made a protracted trade war detrimental to both sides. The economic fallout, including job losses, price increases, and supply chain disruptions, would be felt by businesses and consumers alike. A glimmer of hope emerged from a meeting between Ursula von der Leyen and US Vice President J.D. Vance in Paris. The two leaders, while acknowledging their differences on the issue of tariffs, found common ground in their assessment of the challenges facing the global steel industry. Both pointed to the issue of overcapacity, particularly from China, as a contributing factor to the crisis. This shared concern offered a potential avenue for cooperation. By addressing the root causes of the global steel glut, rather than resorting to protectionist measures, the EU and the United States could work together to create a more stable and sustainable global steel market. This, in turn, could pave the way for a de-escalation of the trade dispute and a return to a more cooperative relationship. The path forward remained uncertain. Much depended on the willingness of both sides to engage in good faith negotiations and find mutually acceptable solutions. The reimposed tariffs served as a stark reminder of the fragility of the global trading system and the ever-present threat of protectionism. The world watched closely, hoping for a swift and amicable resolution to the dispute, one that would strengthen, rather than weaken, the bonds of transatlantic trade and cooperation.